So this is just a quick video on the word of the day, hate speech. Everybody seems to think that everything is hate speech right now, so let's talk about it. What is hate speech? What isn't it? What should we do about it? Whenever a controversial academic like Jordan Peterson or someone tries to give a talk at a place like the University of Toronto, which, as an institution of higher learning, should be a bastion of free speech, a haven of free speech, as universities traditionally have been, a bunch of protesters, a bunch of social justice types, often linked to the student government in some way, turn up and try to disrupt it. They do things like make a bunch of noise outside, they blow whistles, they scream inarticulately, maybe even they bring a white noise machine to try to drown him out so no one inside can hear what he's saying. They also do stuff like pulling the fire alarm, scuffling with the police, creating some sort of security concern so the talk has to be cancelled. They just trample all over free speech. Now, most of the time, they just kind of take it for granted that they have the right to do this. They're very indignant, and to them that's the same thing as being right, so they do whatever they want. But on the rare occasion that one of them stops to consider a very sensible question like, who the fuck are you to decide who gets to speak and who doesn't? Who the fuck are you to decide which views get to be expressed and which don't? Who the fuck are you to decide for people you haven't met which ideas they can be exposed to and which they can't, like you're their goddamn parents and they're 4 years old? They tend to say something like, well, it's hate speech. It's not free speech, it's hate speech, so we get to shut down the talk. It's hate speech. Now, to begin with, if they knew anything about Canadian law, they would know there's no such thing as hate speech under Canadian law. There's willful promotion of hatred. But, and this is a small point, I know, but it just kind of shows you that they haven't even researched this. They haven't cracked the book. They don't care to find out what hate speech is. They come up with their own definition based on their own crackpot theories that come out of the social sciences, the anthropology department or gender studies department or any of those places where most of what they do is invent jargon to try to make it seem like they're doing something. But they've got their own definition of hate speech, and that's good enough for them. If they actually looked at the definition of hate speech, or willful promotion of hatred, under Canadian law, if they read some of the jurisprudence, like Keegstra, Zundel, Watcott, Taylor, Irwin, Toy, they would know several things. First of all, they would know that the courts would never in a million years consider something like what Peterson has been saying to be hate speech. They have been very, very careful to reserve prosecution for the most direct, unabashed, obvious attempts to promote hatred at minorities. Holocaust conspiracies, saying that the Jews are trying to take over the world. Saying that gays are corrupting our values or stuff like that. That's the kind of thing which is hate speech under Canadian law. Saying you don't think that there's a gender spectrum, refusing to use pronouns, is not goddamn hate speech. Read the stuff. But this is the thing, they won't. They're very, very lazy. They like to yell and chant and protest. They don't like to read so much. They don't like to figure out what they're talking about before they do things like trample free expression. So that's the first thing that they would know if they had actually taken a look at the literature. The second thing that they would know, not if they took a look at actually the literature, the jurisprudence pertaining to hate speech and willful promotion of hatred, but if they just knew the first thing about the way that legal systems work, and they should because they're using legal terms like hate speech. That's a legal term. That's saying that people should be thrown in jail. They're availing themselves of the protections of the legal system, trying to use it to justify what they're doing. They should know something about it. Well, in our legal system, if you think that someone is committing a crime, like willful promotion of hatred, you file a police complaint. If the police think that there is enough evidence to press charges, they press charges and it goes to the courts. Then the courts look at the law and they interpret the law and they look at precedent and they decide whether or not the person is guilty of the crime. And then if they find them guilty, they impose a punishment. There's also an appeals process. The point is the person gets a chance to defend themselves. You don't just get to decide that people have committed crimes and then go out and punish them for it. These protests where they shut down the hate speech, where they defend themselves from the hate speech, this isn't a legitimate form of protest. This is vigilantism. And the police should really be arresting them and dragging them away when they try to do things like silence other people's right to freedom of expression. But they don't, for whatever reason. I'm not going to tell the police how to do their jobs. I think probably it has to come from, government at some level. The police have been very patient with these guys. I don't want to rag on them too much. But the point is, what they're doing is a crime. Vigilantism, unlike whatever Peterson is saying, is actually a crime. You can't take the law into your own hands. You can't be judge, jury, and executioner. A mob of maniacs outside of a building doesn't get to decide what the law is and then enforce the punishment without a trial, without due process, without the person having a chance to defend themselves. These people are not protesters in the legitimate sense of the word. forward trying to advance ideas and get people to consider them. They're just criminals. They're vigilantes, they're bullies, they're paternalist maniacs who think that they get to decide for us which views we can hear and which ones they can't, and I don't know why anybody treats them like a legitimate political movement. I don't know why anybody treats them like anything except a gang of bullies deciding for others what ideas they can be exposed to or express. They're the language police, and they're not even the police. They're just a bunch of undergrads who live in their parents' basements. We should really stop putting up with this.